One of the most crucial pillars to planning and executing an adventure is your snacks. Anyone that's done an adventure knows that you are ravishing food, and it's important that you're filling your body with quality snacks and not just junk food. And I've made that mistake way too many times. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about our newest sponsor, Wonderful Pistachios. Pistachios are a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids and one of the highest protein snack nuts. And also, unlike meat, protein-powered pistachios are naturally cholesterol-free and add fiber to your day. And not only that, they're really filling, so it's none of those empty calories that you get with a lot of other snack food. And it's super versatile as well. I just had some on a salad literally 10 minutes ago, and I had some as a snack this afternoon. And you can get them different ways. You can get them lightly salted, roasted, sweet chili, salt and pepper, and you can get them traditionally in shell or no shell. So if you're interested, visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
Progressive is America's #1 motorcycle insurer, so we understand motorcycles. No, really, we have a bike translator.
Okay, this is awkward, but this bike says he'd appreciate it if you removed his skull-pattern saddlebags. He feels self-conscious about them around all the other bikes, and he says you're not fooling anyone. You mostly ride with your golfing buddies. Listen, I'm just the messenger here. Oh, no, I don't want to say that. I think you made yourself clear.
Quote with Progressive and see if you could save with America's #1 motorcycle insurer. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Hey folks, today we're hearing from Lisa Thompson about climbing the 7 summits of the world. Yes, the 7 summits. And Lisa was not someone who had a mountaineering background growing up. She grew up in the Midwest, and she's going to tell us about how she got into mountaineering and climbing and what the 7 summits was like. But that she wouldn't even consider as her biggest achievement. She would consider the very difficult mountain, notoriously known as the deadliest mountain in the world, K2, as probably being the biggest challenge of her life for a very special reason. And also, the anticlimactic finish of this experience. You'll have to listen to the episode to hear more. But thanks to our sponsor, Gnarly Nutrition, for sponsoring this episode. You can hear more about them later. But they're huge supporters of the podcast, and I'd appreciate it if you used our code GNARLYADVENTURE15 for 15% off your order at their website. Gnarly Nutrition helps you get out there and have adventures. But let's go ahead and jump into Lisa's story and hear about it. And before we do, she also has a book that is coming out in January, so we're kind of an early jump on it, but her book is going to be called Finding Elevation. You can learn more about it at her website, lisaclimbs.com, and more about her training and coaching plans for climbing and for all kinds of athletes at alpineathletics.net. All right, folks. Today, you heard a little bit about Lisa's story in the intro, but we have her here now to talk. Lisa Thompson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mason. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. And so we talked a little bit about it before I started recording, but where are you coming from and where is home for you, if those aren't the same places?
So today, those are the same places. I live in Seattle, which is where I am today. And it's actually nice and sunny here, which is a rare thing.
Oh, man. Yeah. So the old adage is true. I hear different things from different people. It's not as bad as people say, or it is as bad or worse.
I think it depends on your perspective. I find that so I'm not native to the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in central Illinois, and I really love seasons. I love extremes in temperature and in weather. And Seattle is just so temperate. So people, I think, who grew up here love that. They love the gray days and they love this semi-constant drizzle, especially in the winter. But I just really crave sunshine and heat. So I'm not always, it's not always my favorite place to be, especially in the wintertime.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, it's a great time to come down here. I live in Florida, of all places. Hot and sunny today, that's for sure.
Yeah.
As it is most days. But yeah, I want to know how, I know you've told this story many times, but I'd love to hear you're not native to Seattle, you're native to the Midwest. How did you go from the Midwest to, being a mountaineer, but getting to Seattle first and being surrounded by that? Because I'll be honest, a lot of people on this show and a lot of adventurers are from places, myself included, a place that isn't considered an adventure hub,
Yeah, I didn't grow up around adventure really. My sister and I had a pretty sort of normal suburban upbringing. Our vacations were like, we'd drive to like the Indiana Zoo or something.
Ooh.
I didn't grow up in an adventurous family. But I loved the outdoors. Even when I was a kid, I loved climbing trees and making up games outside. And what brought me to the Pacific Northwest was really work. I had worked at the time I was working for Hewlett Packard. And that sort of morphed into Philips Healthcare. And that brought me to the Pacific Northwest. But I had experienced it a little bit as a kid because my aunt and uncle live in the north central Cascades in a tiny little town called Winthrop. And so I used to come out here in the summer to spend a few weeks with them. And I remember seeing mountains for the first time and just being like, what? Like it's just so surreal when all you've seen as a kid are the flatlands of the Midwest and cornfields, which have their own sort of beauty and awe, I think. But seeing something just so huge and permanent like a mountain as a kid really had a big impact on me. And so I sort of intended to always get back here. And thankfully, that I could do that through work later in life.
What was there the thought with the job that I'm going to have access to this stuff now? Like was that a big part of it? Or was that just, that's kind of a nice cherry on top?
No, it totally was. I think that there was just something, and in part it's because I'm very close to my aunt and uncle who live nearby. And so part of it was just feeling like I had this chance to be someplace that felt more like home to me and to be with family that was really close and important to me. So that was definitely part of it. But I didn't, I still wasn't into the mountains. I wasn't climbing. I wasn't really exploring in them at that point in my life. And then, the part of how I got into mountaineering and into climbing, I like to say that it was spite that drove me to the mountains. So in that very first job that I took here, I was the only woman at my level. So all my peers were men. Even when I looked above and below me on the org chart, not a lot of people who looked like me. And I was in my 20s, mid 20s, so badly wanted to fit in with these guys. And, I did sort of the normal, like just work my fingers to the bone, always the last one to leave the office. And that just wasn't getting their attention. And so these guys would go climbing in the Cascades many times a month. And I would hear their stories back in the office about crossing rivers and climbing glaciers and, crazy snowstorms. And I was like, that's the way to get their attention and to allow me to be seen as capable by them. So I had no interest in like climbing for the sake of climbing. It was really because I wanted those guys to see me as competent like them. And I wanted to be a part of their group. And so instead of doing like the normal thing, which would have been, hey, climbing, that sounds cool. Can I come with you? I'm sure they would have said yes. I just got frustrated. At that point, I really wasn't confident enough to have initiated that conversation. So I just decided I'd go climbing on my own. Again, no idea what that meant. And that started with hikes. And then eventually I signed up with a local guide company to attempt Rainier in 2008.
So you went big off the bat, because I know you started climbing in 2008. So was this like your first objective?
Yeah, it was my first really big objective. Before that, I had just been, basically hiking in the mountains around Seattle. And, that's sort of my personality. Like, I'm just going to jump in with both feet. And when I look back, I'm fortunate to still be in Seattle, and I get to climb Rainier most summers now. And it's a place where I can go for training. And when I look back, again, no idea what I was doing. Like, my backpack weighed probably 45 pounds and I weighed like 110 pounds. I remember the pack in particular was this big purple behemoth thing that, it was probably meant for like overnight camping. It was super heavy just by itself. It probably weighed 10 pounds. No clue what I was doing at all. And that first attempt of Rainier was not successful. So the weather turned bad at about 11,000 feet. And I remember lying in my tent in the dark, just wondering, like, are we going to go? Are we not going to go? Like, what? I just had no idea what was ahead of me. And it terrified me because I didn't know if I was capable of doing it. And I remember being relieved that morning when the guides came around and they're like, the weather's poor. It just doesn't make sense to go higher. And we turned around. So I was grateful. I was grateful that something else turned me around and that I didn't have to make that decision on my own. But there was still this just sense of, I got to get more of this. And that need to be capable was a part of that. And I also found in climbing, this pursuit that is very physical, but also really mental, like thinking back to how I felt lying in that tent. I may have been capable of climbing, but I let myself believe that I wasn't. I let fear get in the way of that. So I learned a lot, but I knew I wanted to come back. And then the next year, signed up with the same guide company. This was 2009, and did stand on the summit of Rainier. And on that climb, there was just, I remember being again in the dark, ascending probably at about 12,000 feet, and just seeing dawn start to break. And, this like light that started to just pierce the horizon, and thinking like, these are colors I haven't seen before. This is a place that so few people get to experience. And I get to be here, and I get to feel my body move and be confident in this environment and feel so close to nature. And so that was like, at that point I was hooked. Like every year after that, I still had a corporate job, and I still had to train and manage, find the money to pay for it. But every year after that, I picked to climb somewhere else in the world.
How did the acceptance or the dynamic change between you and your coworkers after Rainier?
I wish I had a better answer, because people ask me this a lot. I think I went back to the office and I was probably very quiet about it. I probably didn't even tell them that I had done it. And people ask me too, like, what do those guys think now? That, you've made mountaineering such a big part of your life. And they probably don't even know, to be honest. And, and looking back, like I appreciate that scenario and them being a part of what pushed me to the mountains, because I have learned so much about myself, gained so much just from being close to our natural environment. And, so I'm grateful today for that scenario, but I don't, and to be honest, I don't know that they even know.
Well, let me ask you this then, because it's going to be interesting. Is it better that they didn't invite you and you had that spite and kind of that motivation? Because what if they would have invited you? Would you have just been like, oh, yeah, this is fun. This is great. Not my thing, though. You ever think about that?
Yeah. That's an awesome question, because I usually get asked the opposite question. I think if they had asked me, I would have gone along. I would have been very, intent on being as prepared as possible and not being the weakest link. And I probably would have sort of hung out with them a couple times and then moved on to the next thing. I just don't think it would have resonated with me as much if they had asked. I think I really needed that sense of spite and trying to get, this sort of acceptance in order to push me to keep doing it, for sure.
Yeah, it is funny how the world works, and we all work.
Gosh.
It's what motivates us. It's not, like you said, not a great long-term plan to rely on spite, but man, it can really be the spark that ignites, the wildfire for sure.
For sure.
Guilt, spite, anger, those can all be very useful if you put it to good work. Just the other day, I needed to get a new washing machine, and it's kind of thing that like it's nagging, but you don't worry about it until it breaks.
Too late.
Finally, it broke one night, and I was so mad. I just ripped it out of the wall and drove straight to the store. And I said, I don't care if it costs me $1 million. I'm getting one this instant. And it got solved in like an hour. And sometimes you need that burst of emotion to get things done.
We do. We totally do.
You know, get a new washing machine or climb the 7 summits. It's all the same, right? It's all the same. No.
The same emotion. It really is the same emotion. It's just, how we apply it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rainier started, it wasn't successful at first. And I want to actually ask you about that. You were relieved that you didn't have to finish. And I've heard that before. I've experienced that too, of where, okay, I don't have to do all this work right now. Or it's just it's a scary experience. You don't know if you can do it. When did it set in that you needed to get back? Was it right away? Was it, a week later? You're waking up in the morning thinking, that was actually really cool. Like, what got you back out there? Because for a lot of people, that might have been it. Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. I'd like to introduce you to our newest sponsor, Gnarly Nutrition. I know you've heard about them recently because we've had some guests on recently that credits Gnarly for helping them do the adventures that we talk about on this show. So Chris Fisher was one who did the Vert Max. He did 400,000 feet of elevation gain in a month. Check out that episode. That was not too far back. And he credits Gnarly Nutrition for keeping his body literally sustained during that time, just packing in the calories. It's amazing nutrition for anyone doing anything adventure, endurance-based, whether that's in the mountains or bike packing or whatever. It's a great thing to have with you prior to an adventure training and also during an adventure. And also Jason Hardrath, who recently did the 100 fastest known times. He did 100 mountains in 50 days and just was slamming Gnarly Nutrition. He also credits Gnarly for essentially keeping his body sustained. And so Gnarly Nutrition has been around since 2008. They were born in Utah's Wasatch Mountains, and they are committed to educating and inspiring athletes of all levels to be as nutritionally sound as possible. Their nutrition supplements are certified by NSF and have science-backed products free of hormones, free of GMOs, proprietary blends, and nothing artificial. So Gnarly is going to help you get ready and help you sustain during those huge adventure efforts. So if you're looking for the best tasting and the most trusted sports nutrition brand for any endurance athletes, go to GoGnarly, and that is GNARLY.com, and use the code GNARLYADventure15 for 15% off. And just, a personal plug here. I love Gnarly. I love the folks there. They're doing such a fantastic job. They have been so great to work with. They helped provide some products for our Journey to 100 film series that we were doing giveaways with at the end of every film screening. So it's been a pleasure to work with them so far. So if you'd like to support the folks that are supporting this show, definitely go visit GoGnarly.com. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
You're right. And I get to coach mountaineers now, and there's a lot of people who get their, first taste of big mountain weather, big mountain climbing, and they're like, I'm good. But for me, it was pretty immediate that I knew I wanted more of it. In fact, it may have been on the descent that day. I knew I was going to come back and attempt Rainier again. And, I decided I wanted to do it the very next year. I think I learned a lot on that climb. And I really believe that sometimes we learn more when we're not successful than when we are. And so I knew that I needed to improve my fitness. I needed to be more comfortable carrying heavy weight. I needed to just work on the basics of being on a rope team and moving on a glacier. And I needed to also be comfortable confronting that fear. I think part of what I was feeling lying in the tent that night was there's just this giant unknown mountain above me, and I don't know if I'm capable of meeting the demands that mountain is going to ask of me. And so I really went back and I started to focus on all those things. I hired a coach. I started doing more technical climbs, in between so that I could gain just better, comfort wearing crampons and being on a rope team. I took classes, focused on those things. And I really started to dive into the mental part of climbing and, I'm sure we'll talk later, but it's so much so that at one point I had hired just a coach to help me with that kind of improving my mental fitness. So a sports psychologist worked with me before I went to Everest. And I also am I love a good project. I love the idea of organizing and coordinating and putting pieces together and achieving interim goals. And so just about every mountain, including Rainier, that second attempt was like that for me. I had assessed what I didn't know or where I felt my deficiencies were, and then set out to improve them. And so grateful that the next year I was successful. And, there's this thing in climbing that we say climbing in good style, which means you're contributing positively to your team. You've, sort of got yourself together. You're able technically to climb that mountain. You have the right skill and experience to be there. You're positive. And I felt like I climbed that mountain in good style. And it just pushed me to want more of it.
So how quickly or how did it develop going from, okay, this was an amazing experience with Rainier to I'm going to start doing, more projects around here, I assume, in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest. When did your sights get set on some of the seven summits? Because I don't know if it was I'm going to do the seven summits or I'm going to focus on one first. And then that's how a lot of times how it happens with folks I've talked to, at least.
Totally. Yeah, it was not I'm going to climb the seven summits. It was one of the things I did in my preparation was just to read every book I could about climbing any mountain. And I remember reading Dick Bass's book about the seven summits, and just the adventure and the camaraderie and the, wild places that he and Rick visited were just so cool to me. And that was sort of all I knew about climbing at that point. It was oh, there's this thing. So you climb the highest mountain on every continent. I don't know if I really want to do that. I don't know if Everest is really ever going to be something that's important to me, but let me just pick one of those mountains and that seems, doable for me. And that'll be the next. And so I chose Elbrus, which is the highest point in Europe. It's in Russia. And I summited that in 2010. And I still really wasn't committed to doing the seven summits, but I just was keep climbing a different mountain on every continent. And at some point I felt so in 2015, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And, I was really starting to get my stride as a climber. I was feeling confident. I was about to leave for the Himalaya to climb my first mountain there. And, climbing in the Himalaya, I think for any aspiring mountaineer is a really big deal. And it felt very important to me that I was at this point in my climbing career where I had the skill and experience to take on an 8,000 meter peak. And I chose Manaslu, which is it's 8,160 feet or meters, because it seemed like a very, it's sort of an entry level, not very technical 8,000 meter peak. But I, was diagnosed with breast cancer just as I was preparing to climb that mountain. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but that experience of realizing how fragile life is and that it can change for you in a second. And that I was 42 years old. I, thought of myself as an athlete. I thought I was doing all the right things to keep myself healthy. And yet there were tumors growing inside of my body. And so that realization led me to think, well, if I'm really committed to climbing and to pursuing, these mountains and continuing to climb and prove myself and learn about myself, then why wouldn't I climb the highest mountain in the world? So it was really that experience and that realization and the changes related to cancer that sort of sealed for me that I would climb the seven summits.
Wow. Yeah, that's
I just
wild.
jumped ahead a lot there.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I know it's a big part of it. How much was, because we hear this story sometimes of folks battling cancer to achieve something great. How much was cancer taking out of you?
So I was super fortunate that it was found early. I was diagnosed as stage 1 cancer, and my cancer was removed surgically. So I didn't have to have chemotherapy or even radiation. And so I, so grateful that, my therapy was much simpler and more straightforward than it is for a lot of women with breast cancer. I think what, cancer took from me, I think it gave me a lot more than it took, really. And I couldn't have said that, for a while because I was mad. I wanted it out of me. I didn't want my life to change. I didn't want my body to change. But in retrospect, and I think, like we were saying about learning more from not achieving a goal in the mountains, I learned a lot and I gained a lot from cancer about what I want my life to be like and who I want to surround myself with and how I want to spend my time and the things that I want to prioritize. And so I, not saying this is the right path for everybody, but I really changed my life. I quit my corporate job. I got a divorce. I sold a lot of things, lived in my car for a while, and traveled and climbed because that's what I wanted my life to be about. And, that was probably the pendulum swinging very far in one direction, and it sort of settled back, to a less extreme position today. I do, I have a house now and a dog and started my own company, but it really, cancer just gave me perspective that life is fragile and that it's up to us to define the lives that we will live and the priorities and how we will spend our time. And I didn't want to look back and be like, wow, I should have quit that corporate job sooner. And so it gave me the push, just like spite, gave me the push to make those changes.
Spite and cancer are just the best things that ever happened to you, it seems like. Spite and cancer, that's the title of this episode. No. What do you think we as humans, or you personally, need something like cancer to make these necessary changes? You know what I'm saying? Because
yeah,
a lot of us, I mean, it's totally different, but a lot of us don't drive as carefully until we almost get in an accident.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're like careful for a week or two, and then it goes right back to the bad habits.
Yeah.
But do you think we need this?
I think I needed it at that, that point in my life. I also think that there are signs that you're not on the right track, but I wasn't paying attention to them. I was just heads down in work. I would have called myself a workaholic. I let that create so much stress in my life, just this desire to achieve and be promoted and be accomplished where I worked. And I was in an unhealthy marriage. My husband was an alcoholic. I was drinking more than I should and being unhealthy. And I think I needed cancer to just wake me up and be like, is this how you want to spend your life? Like, are these the priorities you want to have? And it's what I needed to change. And I hear that from other cancer survivors too, that have, sort of taken stock of their lives after they're diagnosed and reprioritized and made changes. So I'd like to think that now I pay more attention to things. I'm much more in tune with, just my intuition and what my body's telling me and how I'm feeling. But at that point in my life, I really needed to be just slapped in the face by something that was going to make me shift.
So it seems that was what it took for you to start the project of climbing the 7 summits. How did you start to approach it, or just at least organize it in your mind one after the other? Because you said you quit your job, and I know these things aren't cheap. So what what was the plan? How were you planning to tackle this?
Well, for a while I had no plan. And I literally within 3 or 4 months had quit my job, gotten divorced, sold my house. I didn't have a great plan. And I know that, the people around me, my closest friends and my family were just sort of like, okay, like she's always figured it out. I'm sure she will again, but this seems a little risky. So I would say I just sort of felt my way through it, really.
And how did that feel? How did that feel from your perspective?
It felt scary on the surface, but deep down, it felt right. And that was the thing that was hard to explain to friends, that, I just had this sense that I was on the right path for me in this moment. And I think that's kind of all you can do in life, right? Is be like, you have a plan, or maybe you don't. You have maybe some goal out in the future, and you just have to get through it every day by assessing what feels right for you. And so there was a very long time that I kind of lived in that liminal space of like, you know, just day by day, this is what I'm going to do. And things started to become more concrete. And I eventually started my own company. And I actually did have another corporate job at one point because I just felt like I wanted a little more stability financially. But I would say I just felt my way through it.
What was first on your list to climb, and how did that go?
So I first climbed, in terms of the 7 summits, this was before I had cancer. I climbed Elbrus and Aconcagua, Denali, and then I shifted to climbing in the Himalaya. And I would say that first Himalayan peak, Manaslu, which I attempted in 2015, was very pivotal for me. So I had just, was still recovering from cancer, really. I knew my body was not 100%. And I just felt this deep need to be in the mountains. And so I remember thinking, like, I'm going to give this my best shot. And we were again turned around by avalanche, so another climb that wasn't successful. But I would say, just going back to that, I learned sometimes more by not summiting than by summiting. It just solidified in me that this is what I want my life to be about, being in the mountains and learning there and, moving there and eventually helping other people achieve their mountain.
If you're like me, adventure is often your therapy, but guess what? We can't always go on an adventure, and sometimes we just got to talk to somebody. Sometimes time out in the wilderness in complete silence doesn't solve everything in the modern world, but it gets pretty close. And for all the other therapy needs that you have, BetterHelp is there for you. It is the world's largest therapy service, facilitating over 5 million video sessions, voice calls, chats, and messages every single month. Over 30,000 licensed, accredited, and board-certified therapists from BetterHelp's network have helped more than 2 million people face life's challenges and improve their mental health. So if you'd like to learn more about BetterHelp, and I will just admit I personally see a therapist virtually. I've never met them, and it's a lot of help. If you want to give it a shot as well, go to betterhelp.com to learn more. BetterHelp.com. When it comes to watching the big game, every second counts, especially if you are missing even a moment of the action to go for a drink run. Luckily, there's Drizzly. It's the #1 app for alcohol delivery. Y'all know I work for a brewery. It's non-alcoholic beer, so we can ship it right to your house. But you can't do that with other brands. But now you can with Drizzly. You can shop local stores, compare the prices over a huge selection of beer, wine, spirits, and get it all delivered to your house in under 60 minutes. Or you can schedule it up to 2 weeks in advance. So if you're throwing a big party, have it all ready to go. Talk about a slam dunk. They also make it very easy to send those as a gift. You can literally gift people that alcohol right to your friends, family, for whatever occasion, even if that occasion is rubbing in their face that their team lost. In your face, other team. So if you're looking to spend more time watching the game, download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today.
Goals. So that solidified for me that I would attempt Everest. And I remember coming home and talking to my climbing coach and saying, my goals for Manaslu had been to use supplemental oxygen and to climb above 8,000 meters, because I felt like those were important things for me to test out if I was going to keep climbing bigger and taller mountains. And I didn't achieve either of those things. We turned around at 24,000 feet. And I remember talking to my coach and saying, like, but I didn't go to Manaslu. I didn't achieve the things I wanted on Manaslu. And, he reminded me that sometimes you get what you get from a mountain is sometimes what you need. It's not always what you set out to achieve or to accomplish there. And so it was certainly true of that mountain. And I remember telling him, I think I want to climb Everest. And he's like, we'll get you ready. And I reiterated, but I want to climb it in March. And this was in November. And I still had multiple surgeries, cancer-related surgeries. And he had confidence that I could do it. And so that was, for many people, myself included, was really the first just huge, big, audacious goal that I took on in the mountains. And that was 2016.
Tell us about Everest, because I know you had to quit your job right before this. It was pretty quick. It was Manaslu, then Mount Baker here in the U.S., and then Everest, jumping right in. Yeah. Does it live up to the lure, or is your perspective change now that you've done it versus when you were looking forward to it?
Yeah, great question. I think that, Everest will always be, for so many people, because it's the tallest mountain in the world, it's sort of the pinnacle of climbing achievement, of mountaineering achievement. And I think that it will always be special to me because it happened so quickly after I was diagnosed with cancer. And I became just so tenacious about preparing for that mountain. And so when I summited it, I just had this immense sense of gratitude that I was able to get to the summit and back safely. But I think, Everest is not the hardest mountain in the world to climb. There are many, many other mountains that are more challenging. I think it's very well known, right? Everyone knows. And I think people who aren't, sort of the average person I meet at a dinner party will say, oh, you climbed Everest. That must be oh my gosh, how hard was it? And I want to say often that Everest is challenging, but I climbed this other mountain, K2, which is way more difficult. And people want to talk about Everest because that's what people know about. So for me, it was not the most challenging mountain that I've climbed. That distinction goes to K2, and I sort of want to leave it with K2. I don't know that after that summit, I really have a desire to take on anything that's more dangerous or challenging. But for me, Everest was, it just proved to myself what my body was capable of, and that I could be strong again, and that I could set a big goal and work hard. And with the support of so many people, I could get there again in good style and feel good about my climb.
Yes. So, you went through the initial 7 summits: Elbrus 2010, Aconcagua 2011, then Denali and Grand Teton 2012, and just kind of through the years. And then Everest in 2016. You only had one mountain to go for the 7 summits, the big, and it was the easiest one in Australia. Yet you continued to kind of almost increase the difficulty by staying in Nepal for the next 2 years, or in the Himalaya the next 2 years. Tell us about the other 2 mountains. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Is it Tarke Kong?
The Tharki King.
Tharki King. And then, of course, K2, which you were the second American woman to summit. That's obviously, a lot of people know that as the deadliest mountain in the world. I don't know much about Tharki King or Tharki Kong, whatever you just said. Tell us about those 2. And also, the same question I asked about Everest, does it live up to the hype? How does K2 live up to its lore?
So K2 does, for sure. And I'll dig into that. I had plans to go to K2 in 2017, and the team that I, was invited to climb with just sort of fell apart. People had other priorities, or they changed their mind. And so I was sort of left at 2 months before the departure date in June of 2017, without any climbing partners. And I had searched around with, other outfitters that I knew were climbing K2 that season. And, just none of them seemed like a good fit, or the logistics wouldn't work out. So I shifted gears and climbed Tharki Kang that year instead, which was an unclimbed peak at the time, in Nepal. And it, was super fun. I was, made some great friends on that climb that I have, I'm still friends with, and we're organizing now charity climbs together. So it was really, it was a fun climb. It was sort of a big, it was a big letdown, from being honest, because I had trained and was prepared and ready for K2, and then it just didn't happen that year. It just didn't come together for me. And of course, K2 was summited by another American woman in 2017, Vanessa O'Brien, and that was tough for me as well. So it was kind of a year of just being bummed out a little bit. But I think looking back, I'm so happy that I summited K2 without the pressure of being the first American woman. I'm glad that, the team I had on K2 was just phenomenal. We were super lucky. Everything seemed to come together. And again, I've made lifelong friends there. So K2, to answer your question, certainly 1 gazillion% lives up to the hype of being the most dangerous mountain. I hate to say in the world, but I like to sort of have a relationship with a mountain, and I like to sort of feel like, okay, do you want me to be here today? Like, how are we, I think of myself as working with a mountain when I climb. I know it doesn't make sense to me when I hear people say they conquered a mountain, because I just don't think that's how it works. I think that, anytime we're in nature, we're like working together with our surroundings. And so K2, I just never felt super welcome on that mountain, by the mountain. I felt like it was constantly trying to kill me. I felt like, there were avalanches and rockfall and other deaths, and it felt just very dangerous every day. And every day I wanted to quit. And, there were moments, I remember a moment climbing what's called the Black Pyramid, which is a section of just really chunky rock at about 25,000 feet. And being like, it just felt, every movement of my body felt so arduous. And I remember thinking, I don't think I can do this. Like, I'm just not sure that I can deliver what this mountain is asking of me. And I remember just looking back behind me, and there's, just, it's very exposed. I could see all the way down to base camp. And I was thinking I could get down there, right? It wouldn't be easy, but I could reverse my direction on this rope. I could start descending. I could be back to base camp tomorrow. I could be like eating cake, like sleeping, in an actual like proper tent. I can be back in Islamabad in a few days in a hotel, taking a nice bubble bath. I just let myself sort of, sit in that fantasy of quitting and what that would feel like. And, I remember then just telling myself, like, just take, one more movement on this mountain, just lift your hand one more time to the next rock. And I just started to tell myself every time I moved, I would repeat the words, "I'm strong." And I just kept doing it over and over. And that, was sort of the only thing in my mind. I let that belief that I was strong erase that, desire to quit. And I'm very happy I did because, above that point on the Black Pyramid, it's mostly snow, dangerous snow that's very avalanche prone. But I'm much more comfortable on steep snow than I am on steep rock. And so, getting past what for me was sort of the crux it was tough in that moment. And I was very close to turning around.
What do you think just kept you going in that moment? Because, I I think a lot of us are there on adventures, especially, is it just thinking back through all the other experiences. Obviously, this wasn't on the Seven Summits list, so you didn't need to get it for that project. But I assume this in a way was even more important.
Yeah, I think it was more important. And, there was a bit of ego involved. I have to be honest. And there was certainly ego associated with, I had a climbing sponsor at that point. I'd made it very public that I was doing this. And I don't know that that's a positive thing, but I have to be honest that there was a bit of ego in that decision. But I think there was also this desire to just continue to prove what I was capable of in the mountains. And when I left for Pakistan to climb K2, I wasn't 100% confident that I could climb it successfully. I'd, been through, I'll say the word, my climbing coach had stopped working with me because he believed that I was climbing above my ability and attempting K2. And, he had sort of been this secret magical ingredient, I felt, to my success in the mountains. And so I'd had to, train myself, which turned out to be a blessing. But, the moment was very, it made me question what I was capable of. And I had, interviewed and talked to a lot of people who had summited K2 or attempted K2. And they're all like, yeah, I don't know. It's a big, tough, dangerous, deadly mountain. I just didn't have a lot of support. And there was this little tiny belief or voice or spark inside of me that said, you can do this. And when I left for Pakistan, I remember telling myself, I'm going to go and I'm going to give it my best, and I'm going to listen to my body and, not climb above my ability, not get myself into anything that I can't get out of. And I felt like in that moment on the Black Pyramid where I so badly wanted to turn around, I was letting myself down more than anything else, because I was ignoring that little belief inside of me that thought that I could do it. And that was more important than the ego part of that decision. But it's ultimately what pushed me to keep going that day. It was just this little belief that I could do it, and that it was, I was just afraid and I was scared, and I was more resilient, I knew, than those things, and more capable than those things. And I was able to keep pushing if I just focused on what I could do.
And how good did that feel to get up and summit that mountain?
That is a crazy feeling, So a few days later, we attempted the summit, and we had almost aborted our climb because of weather and conditions on the mountains. So it was very sort of emotional, are we going, are we not, which is so common in high altitude mountaineering because there's so many factors that are uncontrollable. But I remember lying in the tent at high camp with, two other men, one on either side of me. I was in the middle of the tent, just getting myself ready for the summit and feeling like this is your shot. This is what you came for. This is what you've trained for. And, leaving for the summit that night in the dark, it was maybe 9 or 10 p.m. And, there's this very famous feature on K2 on the, summit day where you have to climb under a giant serac. So a serac is this, glaciers are constantly moving down mountains. And when they encounter terrain that's steeper or some feature that changes, they often break. And, so this giant serac that does occasionally break off of this point in 2008, it very famously broke when people were climbing and killed, I think, 11 people. And I'm climbing, it's dark, and I know that serac is up there, and you can't see it, but I can feel it. I can feel there's just this looming sort of mass above me, and, it's bigger than a house. And I start to realize that my headlamp is not as bright as everyone else's. And I, sort of assess it, like look off in the distance to see how far I can see, try to ignore it, try to like will it to go away. Eventually I have to stop, and, it was all good mountaineers. I had a fresh set of batteries close to my body in my down suit, fiddle with thick gloves and, -10 temperatures to try to replace those batteries, get it working again, start climbing with my team again. And the same thing happens maybe 20 minutes later. And I don't have a spare anymore. And at that point, I wasn't carrying a spare headlamp with me. And I know that I'm about to, encounter this point of the future or point of the mountain where I'm under the Serac and I have to traverse to the left under it. And that traverse is, there's a wall of ice to my right. I'm walking to the left, and the path is less than one boot width wide. And so, sort of seeing what I can see through other people's headlamps and watching snow fall off and knowing there's just a couple miles of air, beneath you. If you fall there and the anchors didn't hold, you would certainly die. And I need to rely on my team at this point. I cannot climb across this traverse without the benefit of eyesight. And so thankfully, Rob Smith, who I will forever be grateful for, had a spare set of batteries and helped me change them. And I was able to ascend and continue climbing. But you asked about, so that was sort of the flavor of how summit night started out for me. It was not very smooth. I had felt like I had all these obstacles that I had to just keep one after another, like working through. But I remember light, it had gotten light out. It was morning, and looking up, and I was by myself on a slope of pretty powdery snow, which, if you've ever ascended that kind of snow, it's super frustrating. Now I'm at, 28,000 feet, breathing bottled oxygen. But nonetheless, you take one step up and you just slide back 3, and you take another step up and you slide back. It's just incredibly physically and mentally taxing. And I stopped for a second and looked up, and I could see, bright colors of people's down suits. And I was like, oh my God, that's the summit. Like, it's right there. And I remember telling myself not to cry, just keep it together. Like, it's only halfway and you're not even there yet. Just keep, put your head down and just keep moving forward. And eventually, I don't know, an hour later, maybe, stood on the summit. And that I kind of have a no celebrate rule on most summits, especially big mountains, because maybe it was Ed Beester's, someone very famously said, it's only halfway. Like, there's a lot of work to do to get back down to safety. And, most accidents occur on the descent. I had studied that mountain, created a spreadsheet and a pivot table of every single death, and how and when they occurred and where. And so I knew that, it was, if something bad was going to happen, it was probably going to happen going down. But I did let myself get a little bit emotional on the top of that summit, in part because I had, about a year after I was diagnosed with cancer, my father was diagnosed with lung cancer and died right after I got home from Everest. And I carried his ashes with me, as you do on every single mountain, which is sort of, my dad never traveled anywhere. He spent most of his life in central Illinois. And so to be able to travel to these exotic places and, leave a little bit of him there was very meaningful. But I remember fiddling with his ashes. They were in a pill bottle. And that, that was the last of the ashes that I had of him. I threw into the air above Pakistan that day, which is a very special moment for obviously many reasons. But he was always so proud of what I could accomplish in the mountains, but so terrified also because it's, he just couldn't, having never really traveled to the mountains, he couldn't really grasp what
It's
those
just
dangers were.
unfathomable.
Yeah, totally unfathomable. And then he would like watch, like the Everest movie and be like, oh my God, you're going to be sliding down the, it's over dramatized. So most of his input was like over dramatization of climbing. But that summit, just to get back to your question about the feeling, that was by far, and I hope always, the best feeling of being on top of a mountain that I've had. And, the descent was not simple or easy either, but I'm glad that I took a moment there to just be like, to celebrate a little bit and to really feel grateful for having made it that far.
Wow. Amazing story. Really took us into the experience. That was wild. So that was back in 2018.
Yes.
And I would assume that it was probably pandemic that slowed you down for the next few years. But you finished it out. You rounded it out with, some say, an equally difficult mountain, Mount Kosciuszko in Australia. No, I'm just kidding. I'm pretty sure you can like push a stroller to the top. Did you allow yourself to celebrate on that summit, even though you're only halfway?
So, funny story about that mountain. So I, at the time, actually had a corporate job, which I was very grateful for during the pandemic. And I, was a part of a project that took me to Australia to work for a couple months. And it was a, very super stressful project. I didn't have a lot of free time, but I had this one weekend that, that was my one shot to summit Kosciuszko. And it's about a 6-hour drive from Sydney. I've never driven on the other side of the road. I was like, I'm like probably going to kill myself getting there as opposed to actually have.
So it was the most dangerous mountain.
It probably, yeah, in some respects it was. I was so over prepared. I think I had, 5 layers of clothes with me. I had like crampons for some really silly reason. I was like, there is no freaking way that I am not climbing to the top of this mountain today. And of course, for people listening, it's basically a hike. There's a ski resort there. I remember, I started hiking from the village and I didn't see any people. And I remember like, who's going to take my summit photo if I'm the only person up there? Like, this is kind of important. And, then I hike up to the gondola and it's like Disneyland and so many people. I, was so determined to get up to that summit, and I carried a tiny little bottle of champagne, and there were probably 50 people up, 50 strangers up there. I asked a woman to take my photo, and I'm sure she was like, why is this woman celebrating, hiking up here with a bottle of champagne? So it's sort of funny now to think about, being so ridiculously overprepared. And it was a bit, just because it was COVID, I had envisioned traveling there with like my sister, like, having people around me to celebrate, and it just wasn't possible because of COVID. So I was super grateful, and it was kind of surreal to finish it and then just be like, I hiked back down to the village and had a nice dinner, and then I drove back to work the next day. It was very weird.
That is so wild. How was being on a Zoom with your team? How was your hike?
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
I finished the 7 summits. Hey, boss, can I go drive to the mountain to finish the 7 summits? Good Lord,
right.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, it was weird. The whole thing was weird.
I believe it. Yeah. Well, really way to like hedge your bets on finishing it successfully too, to not leave like the hardest one for the last one.
Right.
We have about 5 minutes left. I was going to ask you, is there one of the 7 summits? I know K2 is special, very special. Was there one that was just different than the others besides Australia Summit? Because that's obviously very different than the rest. Was there one that just sticks out as maybe a little more special?
Yeah, I would say for me, that was Denali, the highest point in North America. I summited it, I believe, in 2012. And excuse me, for me, that was, I knew there's a lot of lore. For me, there was a lot of lore around Denali, and I knew it was going to be challenging, primarily because I weighed 120 pounds today, and probably back then weighed a little bit less. And, the sort of cool thing about Denali is that, you have to carry or pull all of your gear. There are no porters or no Sherpa there to help you. And I knew that, hauling that amount of weight around was going to be really hard. And I'm always determined not to be the weakest link on my team. And so I had just, I remember at one point, like hiking and pulling a sled, just in my neighborhood, and it weighed 102 pounds of, just like, that's what my training was like. It was super intense. And, so I think for me, having summited that mountain, it was really special because I knew I was working so hard to contribute to my team in a positive way. I never wanted to be like, oh, I can't carry, that same amount of weight as the guys on my team. I was the only woman. I wanted to be, on equal footing with everybody else and contribute in a positive way. And I feel like I did that, but it was a lot of, that was probably that and K2, where I would say were the toughest, training that I had to do for any mountain. And so that made it special, I think, that I had to work so hard.
That's really interesting. Really awesome. Beautiful mountain.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of great things about it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So for someone, I know we got to wrap up. I'm sorry, because I want to ask a few more questions, but what's next for you? For someone that completes 7 summits, what's a goal now?
Yeah. So, now a book called Finding Elevation, which will be released in January, on the 10th of January. So folks can check that out. You can pre-order now on Amazon, or if you go to my website, lisaclimbs.com, I'll send you the first couple chapters. You can get an early peek at that. For me, climbing wise, I really don't aspire to do anything more difficult than K2. I'm very happy to make that my proverbial mic drop. But I am, what's important to me now is to just give back. I've gotten so much from the mountains and the communities in Nepal and Pakistan, where I've spent a lot of time climbing. And so along with a couple of female friends who are climbers, we're organizing an all-women's expedition in Nepal for this October. We're going to climb a 6,000-meter peak called Cholatsi, and we're using that as a fundraiser to support women's education in Nepal, which, when I started to dig into it, was just shocking to me. I feel grateful that I've had the education that I have, and that it's gotten me a lot of places. And it's not true for a lot of women in the world, especially in Nepal, where I think the stat is that, for women over the age of 15, 85% of them have not had any sort of formal education. And so we want to start to impact that in a positive way. And so we think it's important to prove what women can do in the mountains, not that we don't like guys, but that, so we're organizing an all-women's team. We have a great Sherpani Sirdar, and that's our plan for this fall.
Awesome. Well, we will be excited to follow along with that. This will probably be coming out close to that time, so it'll be pretty timely there. But Lisa, I wanted to thank you for jumping on. There's a few more questions I'd love to ask, but unfortunately I got to run. But thank you so much for spending time with us and telling us some of these stories.
Thanks, Mason. Thanks for having me. It was really a lot of fun to chat.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
New message. Hey, girlfriend, it's Carol from jury duty. We never actually spoke, but I saw you ordered the same hoagie as me at lunch. What are the chances? Anywho, I heard you just got a boat. We should totally grab some hoagies and take it out for a spin.
When you get a boat, you also get new friends. Make sure Progressive's one of them and get coverage today for as little as $100 a year.
Do I want to feel the wind in my hair? Guilty as charged. Oh, seriously, let's ride on your boat.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Annual premium for basic liability policy not available in all states.
O'Reilly. Change your vehicle's oil before your summer road trip and save money now with Pennzoil and O'Reilly Auto Parts. Right now, get 5 quarts of Pennzoil Platinum Full Synthetic for just $22.95 after mail-in rebate. Save money and protect your engine against sludge and wear with the synthetic oil change. Stop by your local O'Reilly Auto Parts today or O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly.